Hi, everybody. My name is Alyssa McCall, and I'm with Polar Bears International, and it's really exciting to be back with you again on the tundra just outside of Churchill, Manitoba during the polar bear migration. So thank you so much for joining us today. For those of you that haven't joined us before, welcome. This is a really exciting time of year for us at Polar Bears International when we get to be up close with polar bears and sharing them with people around the world. And for those of you that are returning and have seen us before, thank you so much for coming back. We're really excited that people like to tune in every year and we get to know you a little bit. And it's lots of fun. So today we are broadcasting on a couple different sites, but the main one, of course, is explore.org. Thank you so much to Explore for helping us with these polar bear cams. It's just a really amazing program. If you're looking at the Polar Bears International Save Our Sea Ice page and watching from there, that's also wonderful. If anyone is interested in asking questions, which we really encourage you to do, please let us know what you want to talk about. I think the best way to ask questions today will be on the explore.org page in the comment section. So we have Courtney from Explore who's watching that forum, and then Rick from Explore is going to be putting them in to my iPad here through Skype. So thank you to both of them, of course, and please let us know your questions and we can kind of talk about whatever you want to talk about. But today we're going to kind of kick off the season with a broad look of what's going on in the tundra. What are we doing out here? Where are we? And I've got a few special guests with me. So one thing we do have different panelists, different guests, kind of depending on what's going on. And so I'll introduce these lovely people in just a minute. Just to keep you informed, we do have something going on right now. Those of you that have maybe tuned in before might know that it doesn't run smoothly out here all the time. So we do have a bit of a mechanical issue on Buggy 1 today. This is beautiful Buggy 1. So we have a mechanic outside who you may hear him. There may be a little banging. BJ Kirchhofer, who's with Polar Bears International. Can you wave at the camera, BJ? There he is. He is here. He might need to pop out for a second too. So if something's going to go down, we will let you know what's going on with Buggy 1. And before we go any further, of course, we need to thank Frontiers North Adventures, who donates Buggy 1 to Polar Bears International during polar bear season. And, of course, they do many other things for us. They're a wonderful partner, along with Explore.org. Together, along with Parks Canada as well, we help run these polar bear cams that are out in Cape Churchill, at the Churchill Northern Study Center, another great partner, on Buggy 1 here, and then on the Tundra Buggy Lodge, which is just over here out on the tundra. And so I'll introduce you to our guests, and then we will talk a little bit about why we're out here, what we're doing this year, and then we want to take your questions. And I see we already have questions rolling in, so we'll get to those really quickly. But just briefly, I'll actually pass the mic around, and I'll get everyone to kind of say who you are, where you're from, and what your expertise is in, so people kind of know what they can ask you, and then we'll keep moving. Does that sound good? All right. Well, maybe I'll start with Stefan.
Hello, my name's Dr. Stefan Peterson. I'm the head of conservation and research at Assiniboine Park Zoo, which is in Winnipeg. So I do quite a few things up here in Churchill throughout the year. I'm up in the spring studying seals, so we have harbor seals and ring seals. We're interested in them because of their association with ice and with polar bears. And then in the summer, if you're an explorer.org addict like myself, you might have seen me in relation to the beluga camera and the citizen science projects that we have related to belugas. And then in the fall, it's all polar bears all the time. So yeah, that's my expertise, I guess.
Thank you, Stefan. We'll get back to you in a second. And Vicky?
Hi, my name is Vicky Sanation. I live in Iqaluit, Nunavut. I'm also a doctor, a recent doctor. I finished my PhD in 2015 studying the polar bears in Fox Basin, which is a subpopulation just north of where we are here in Western Hudson Bay. And I focus my research on sea ice habitat, the polar bear movements, and also climate change. And it's been fascinating to be here because I've always heard about the Western Hudson Bay bears, and being able to see the bears in person has been fabulous. It's really wonderful. PBI has invited me here to take part in this webcast and other work as well while I've been here.
Thanks, Vicky.
Good afternoon. My name is Bradley Hampson. I'm the Assistant Superintendent of Technology and Library Services with Frontier School Division. My area of expertise is in information and communication technologies, as well as K-12 education. And I also am here as a very grateful guest of both Frontiers North and Polar Bears International. It's been a wonderful experience, despite the mechanical mishap. It's beautiful surroundings, and it's very unique surroundings. So it's a real privilege to be here.
Frontier School Division. They brought up a ton of great teachers. We've got students coming out tomorrow. Frontiers North Adventures has donated a day buggy to take out some people from the school division and from the local school here. So they're going to get to come out on a buggy. And many local students rarely get that opportunity. So we're really excited that we could make that work. And we hope to be doing a couple Tundra Connections webcasts tomorrow. And whether we do them from Buggy One or in town will depend on this mechanical issue right now. So we will let you know how that goes. But it's been really wonderful working with them. So thanks for being here. Great. So we do have a few questions rolling in, which is wonderful. So I'll kind of launch right into it. Maybe before we really get started, just to build a bit of context again for those of you that maybe haven't joined before. So we are just outside of Churchill, which is in northern Manitoba in Canada, of course. And the polar bears that are Bay polar bear population, and that is one of 19 different polar bear populations across the world. There are 5 countries that have polar bears. It's the United States, Greenland, Norway, Russia, and Canada. Hit them all. Okay. Canada has 2/3 of the world's polar bears. And we can look at polar bears across the world, and many different polar bears have different kind of regions that they call home, different types of ice ecoregions that they use. At the end of the day, all polar bears need sea ice, but all populations are kind of different in the way they're managed and the kind of stressors they have on them. Climate change, of course, is a big one, but they have different interactions with people, pollutants, all that sort of stuff. And so we can really build context when we talk about many polar bear questions. But a lot of the time, what you'll hear us talk about is specific to these polar bears. I think it's wonderful. Vicky's here. She's got really neat perspective on more northern populations, which is really great. But of course, we love these Western Hudson Bay polar bears. They are some of the most studied and most photographed in the world, so they're pretty special to us. So I'll maybe start with the question, looking for an update on Ursula. So for even the panelists that might not know, Ursula is one of the polar bears that we follow on the Polar Bears International Bear Tracker. So one of the University of Alberta collared polar bears, and Explore.org sponsors her, so we write occasional updates for her. So Ursula was spotted this year. She came off the ice. She, of course, weaned her cub last winter, and she was spotted this fall by the research scientists. They just did a flyover because she had a collar. They knew who she was. They could read it on the radio and know her frequency. And they got a visual on her, and she looked great. She looked big and fat and healthy. So they do believe that she is pregnant, and she's likely in a den or very soon moving into a den right now. You can see our Bear Tracker has finally been updated, so you should see where her most recent location is. We'll keep an eye on her. We might not see Ursula move again until February or March, so we'll have to be patient. There'll be other bears to follow until then, but we'll keep an eye on her, and when she starts moving in the spring, hopefully her collar will kick back in and we'll be able to watch. We probably won't know how many cubs she has at that time unless we can get another visual on her, though, but definitely stay tuned. It's been really interesting following the bears in this population. They're so amazing, all the different things they do. So here's a question, and Vicky, maybe I'll shoot this one over to you, a little bit, and I can fill in a bit as needed. So someone's got a question about the holding facility. It says, last year, and I think they refers to Manitoba Conservation, which is now Manitoba Sustainable Development, which is a mouthful. We've all been kind of laughing about the name change. We were taking polar bears from the holding facility to areas north of Churchill. Are they doing the same thing this year, and will that mean fewer bears than normal on the cams? Do you know about where any of the bears are going this year?
I only know a bit because I'm not working for Manitoba Conservation Sustainable Development, but I do know recently they released one bear north of Churchill up along the coast, and that was a male bear. And what is most interesting about the release of that bear is that it has a satellite ear tag on it, and the Manitoba folks are tracking its path as it spends time on land, and they're going to be looking at what location it the male goes onto the ice on, because it's a question, where do the male bears in particular, go in the fall as they're going onto the ice. As probably many people know, it's almost impossible to put a collar on an adult male bear because of the circumference of their neck. They're quite thick, so the collar will just slip off its head. Some subadult males can hold a collar for a while they're still developing, and their testosterone hasn't kicked in yet and thickened everything up. And so this is great that they're starting to do this, and we'll get to learn more about male bears and what they do on land and where they go on the sea ice.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Yeah, these GPS ear tags are really, really great. They've put a few out this year. I think they have a few more to go. And it'll help track where those male bears are going if they're taken north. And if they get close to communities or head out on the sea ice, I think it'll be very interesting data. As for whether that will impact how many bears we see on the cams, we don't expect it to at all. Right now, there are a couple slow days at the beginning of the season. We've had some wonderful days over the weekend with a couple different families, some really curious bears around. We know there is a family group in the area at the moment. They're not on the cams yet. We think they're hunkered down in the willows, but people have been seeing them today. So we'll keep our eyes out. And we expect as the next month rolls, we'll only see more bears. So let's all keep our eyes peeled. And I'll jump to another question then. So someone was wondering what other animals we might see out here on the tundra. So we know today you saw some cool Arctic hares. Aren't they so cute? Have Arctic foxes or red foxes been seen? Yes, they're absolutely out here and have been seen on the cams before, as have ptarmigan, little kind of tundra chickens. But maybe I can pass it around and ask what you guys like to see on the cams, or what animals you've seen out here in this area before.
Sure. Yeah, so one of my favorite animals ever, don't tell this to the polar bears, is wolverines. So we don't see them very often on the cams, but when we're flying aerial surveys or just out in helicopters, occasionally you'll get a glimpse, and you see lots of tracks around in this area with wolverines. So that's top of my list. But there's a whole suite of kind of everything from small little mammals to nice big caribou that are wandering around occasionally too.
Yeah, that was great. Both caribou and the wolverine sighting have been seen on the cam, so very neat. Vicki, what do you like to see out here? I'm gonna ask Brad.
Yeah, so what have I seen? Well, the other day we saw a vole, which, I mean, you don't see them very often because they're quite tiny little small mammals, and it was skittering across the ice. So we thought, wow, that's probably the most unusual sighting we'll have all season. And those willow ptarmigan, they were beautiful when we saw that huge flock. Yeah, we did see wolf tracks a few days ago when we had fresh snow, and just where the buggy launch is, and so there's quite a bit of movement out there. How about you, Brad?
During this visit, in previous visits, I've seen caribou, a couple of caribou. During this visit, actually, I've seen a couple of polar bear, which is that's always kind of thrilling and very exciting. And I actually got a decent shot of one with the Ithaca in the background. So I'm a bit of a photographer, so that's something that's good for me. And while I was doing that, I couldn't help but notice I was along a stone wall. And there was all this commotion and motion at the bottom of the stone wall. There was about probably a half dozen or maybe more lemming scooting back and forth. I think it was a lemming condo. I'm not really sure if I was disturbing them or not, but they looked like they were very busy skirting about. So that was kind of an unexpected and really kind of a neat thing to come across.
That's so cool. It's really interesting. So of course we don't know for sure, but all indications are so far that this is a really good year for the small mammal population. We've had a lot of people see lemmings and voles, which you don't always see every year. And it also seems like the predators is a good year. And they tend to cycle like that, of course. In low prey years, you see fewer predators, but we're seeing a lot of lemmings in that this year. And there have been a lot of foxes around. Foxes and birds of prey and things like that. So it might be really neat to keep an eye on some of these cams, and especially the smaller predators too. Someone even got a video clip on Explore the other day. It looked like a polar bear might have got itself a lemming too. It was really neat. It kind of did a quick, attack and chomp and looked like it was eating something. So that's pretty neat. That's obviously wouldn't be much more than a little light snack, but why not? It's kind of fun, I'm sure, for a polar bear to get a lemming. So that's great. Thanks, everybody. So someone has a question. Well, let's see. When can we expect to see cubs? So there are cubs around right now, but they were cubs that would have been born at the beginning of this year. So we usually give polar bears a birthday of January 1st every year just to keep it simple. So we won't see new cubs emerge next year in 2017 until February or March, even April. And then again, we might not even see them. Some research scientists will go out and see them, do some work out there, and then we'll see them maybe when they come back to land in the fall. So there are cubs around right now here. They'd be either about 10 months old, which would be a cub of the year, or they'd be about a year and 10 months old, which would be a yearling. So keep an eye out because they're pretty neat. Do polar bears have a rutting season? Who wants to take that one? Who knows about polar bear mating?
I wouldn't call it rutting.
Yeah, no,
exactly.
we don't really call it rutting.
But it's the same idea.
Is the same,
Yeah, no, polar bears do have a mating season, and it happens between March and May. And it's when the polar bears are out on the sea ice. The males look for the females, and it can be very hard to find them because the sea ice area is huge. I mean, just think about the size of Hudson Bay. It's 800 kilometers across at least in width, and 1,000 kilometers in length up to the next sort of land. So the bears are out there feeding on the sea ice, and they're the males. In March, April, and May, they start looking for the females and tracking them, and sniffing those tracks. And smelly feet. Yeah, and I know there's been some research on smelly feet, but I'm not sure exactly what they've been finding out. I don't know if you know about that.
Because we so Polar Bears International worked a bit with the San Diego Zoo on that. Dr. Megan Owen, who's actually been up here with us before, along with some other wonderful researchers at the San Diego Zoo, took a look at the females' footprints, and they did find, and actually years ago it was kind of theorized that this might be the case, but they found that there's these glands in the female's feet, and they do leave kind of a scent trail, and the males will follow them along the sea ice and track them for a very long time to find these ladies out there. Once you smell a lady, I think you got to keep on her trail because there are not a lot out there, few and far between. Stefan, do you know anything to add about that? Well, one cool thing, actually, I don't know if you were in Churchill at that time, but during the beluga season this year, people did see mating polar bears on the land in July. There were some amazing photos, and it's super rare, right? Everyone was like, what, really? But the photos were incredible, and that's not a common thing. We're not sure if that female had lost her cubs and then got induced back into estrus, or if it was just kind of one of those weird things.
Yeah. I think there was a report from Svalbard as well recently from a really late, like July mating, which is surprising. We don't really know what mechanisms would, polar bears have delayed implantation, so they would mate in the spring, but that fertilized egg would develop a couple cell divisions, and then it wouldn't be until a few months later that it actually implants, and then a fairly short gestation before they're born in the winter. So it might be that, if opportunity or need occurs before implantation, you'd still be on track. If you're a healthy female, you wouldn't necessarily be like July, a few months behind everyone else.
Right.
There's mechanisms in place to kind of keep everything synchronized, and they're not synchronized to a Christmas birthday. They're synchronized to great hunting in the spring for seals. So that's really when cubs and mums need to be out on the ice in the spring.
Right, and that's why we expect around here to see them emerge February, March, April, getting to that sea ice as the seals are pupping and having their babies, because it's easy eating, little fat popsicles out there. So lots of calories for those moms and cubs. That's cool. Thank you. Oh my gosh, we have so many good questions right now. Can children join in your tundra tours? So neat question. Well, we're getting that school buggy out on Thursday, which is great. We do see young students out here sometimes. Usually they've come with a parent or some other guardian. We don't tend to have too many kids on buggy one. We'll give them tours if they're around. That's always fun. But it generally is an adult environment out here. But, we're always welcoming families to come out. It's pretty neat to see. I actually stayed on the lodge on the weekend to talk to a group of folks that had come in. And there were two 11-year-old boys there that had just the most amazing questions and were super into technology and studying polar bears and coming up with new stuff to learn about wildlife. It was super cool to talk to them. So totally encourage any young people out there to come on out and check it out. People are also wondering about Haley. I know Haley's our favorite too. Miss Beluga Boat Captain Haley. She is out here, so she's a guide for the polar bear tours. And so we're hoping to get her on another chat or so later this season. We have seen her and kind of hollered across tundra buggies like, "Hi Haley, how's it going?" And she's doing great. So we'll get her on camera at some point. And one thing that BJ and I are really hoping to do this year too is do more voiceovers. We kind of tweaked it in the buggy so we can do more of those more often. And we're also going to be streaming to Facebook more often, we hope, and giving you more short behind the scenes looks and not always kind of the half hour, 1 hour live chats. Just kind of flip on Facebook and be like, hey, this is what we're doing in the buggy right now. This is what's on the lodge. So stay tuned for that stuff because it's pretty fun. The behind the scenes stuff is a lot of fun out here. There's some fun people, so we have a good time. So another question is, are there polar bears that stay in Churchill during winter, too old or too weak to go on the ice? That must be very dangerous. So what happens? So polar bears definitely need to go onto the ice to eat. So if a polar bear is too weak to get out on the ice, it's not going to be able to make it through the winter. They only really get the calories they need when they're out on the sea ice. And so if a polar bear was too weak to go out on the sea ice, it would pass away on land. If it could get itself out on the sea ice, it would have a chance at getting a meal and going from there. Of course, a lot of what happens out on the sea ice stays on the sea ice because we can't see it. It's way out there, but we do the best we can. Some of you might have seen there is a quite an old male out here right now. He's got a big old scar on his side. We don't know if he'll make it. We don't know where he is right now. He's quite a thin bear. He's an old guy. He's got lots of scars, which means hopefully he's had a lot of good mating opportunities in his life. And Vicky actually saw him. Maybe I'll get you to just comment on him. We've had a couple people check him out. I know people were kind of worried about him, but kind of just looks like he's been through a lot. We're not sure how he's doing, but we're looking for him out here.
Yeah, I know. He disappeared. He hung around the lodge for about almost 3 days, definitely 3 nights and 2 days. And he was laying in the willows not too far away. And he would get up and kind of shuffle around and look around at things. But he was quite thin, but he was still mobile. And, polar bears are quite resilient. And I know my supervisor, Andy DeRoche, with my research, said that he had seen bears where he was sure that they weren't going to make it until the next year, and they were tagged. And then the following year, somehow they got out in the sea ice and managed to get a couple of meals in them, and that was enough to help them carry through. And then they, ate more, and then he was amazed to see the next summer when they were on shore that they were looking good. And so I mean, there is potential that he'll survive, but he is an older bear, so there's we all have a limited lifespan, so it's very possible that he's at the end there. But he was moving. Yeah.
Positive thoughts his
Exactly.
way. Yeah.
Everyone's
cheering him on.
pulling for him.
Yeah. Oh, that's neat. So maybe one question we had is about the polar bear's main prey, and we should definitely back up to talk about that. So polar bears, this is a really interesting spot where we're at right now because we are seeing polar bears on the land right outside our window. This is really unusual. You don't usually see polar bears hanging out on a beach area kind of like this. So polar bears are really adapted to an Arctic sea ice lifestyle. They absolutely need sea ice for their survival. That is their home. That's their habitat. They use sea ice for traveling, aspects of reproduction, and most importantly, hunting. And their main prey is seals, so ringed seals or bearded seals. Also, they occasionally can get other marine animals or eat whale carcasses, things like that. But the common denominator there is marine mammal fat. They really eat blubber fat. They need the tens of thousands of calories that come from fat. So polar bears require a ton of calories to keep moving, to keep healthy, and to keep reproducing. They're different than brown bears in that way. Polar bears really don't use carbohydrates and proteins the same way that grizzly bears can. Polar bears get a lot bigger. They really process fats more efficiently, and they're sea ice animals. And so what we see here in Hudson Bay is annual sea ice. So the sea ice forms in the fall, melts in the summer. When there's sea ice, the polar bears do not want to be here. As soon as there's ice and they can get to seals, they're gone. It's when the sea ice melts in the summer, that's normal here. The bears can come on shore for a few months. They fast with the body fat that they've built up over the last year. And as soon as the ice rolls in back here, they'll go out and be hunting those seals again. They really are not getting any calories from the landscape right now. You will see them, well, like I said, sneak in a vole maybe or something like that. They do eat berries. They'll eat goose eggs. They do eat what is on the land when they can. Even you'll see them eating seaweed quite a bit too. But those are kind of like a few potato chips here and there sort of thing. They're not getting the calories. They're not building body fat. They're still in a fasting mode, so we know that polar bears lose approximately 1.1 kilograms a day when they're out here. And if they come on land big and fat, then that should be enough to last them till the sea ice comes back. So we're hoping the sea ice comes back for the bears. We love seeing them when they do come on land because it's really our only chance during the year. And then they'll be leaving us pretty soon once it cools down out here. So someone was just asking about something like that. So you guys have so many questions. This is amazing. So someone is asking about the collared bears again. So you can see some movements of some collared bears in the area on the Polar Bears International Bear Tracker. You can find that online at our website. So there are, I think, 6 new collars went out this year in this population, and some are still working from last year. There are also some bears collared in southern Hudson Bay. But there's 19 populations across the world. Some populations will have collars in them, others won't. It's really only a very small subset of polar bears that are collared out of the whole population. And again, only the females really usually, because the males can get those collars off. So we do get really amazing data from these collars, data that's been super important in informing us about polar bears and their conservation. But we kind of have a snapshot into some polar bears. And check it out on our website. You'll get a little snapshot. You can see those 19 populations up on the screen right now. And we are in, it's kind of hard to explain, kind of one of the most southern ones there, the kind of rectangle, the vertical rectangle. So thanks for pulling that up, BJ. Pretty neat stuff. So, Vicki, I'm going to pop this over to you again. Lots of great polar bear questions about management and things, and I think that you can explain this way better than I can. So, someone's wondering, which is a great question, when we talk about managing a population, what does that even mean? What does that entail? I know it's complicated.
Yeah, well, and it really depends on where you are in the world. So I'll just reflect on Canada because I'm not really sure what specifically happens in other countries. So in Canada, there is hunting of polar bears that happens. So then there is a management program in Nunavut, Northwest Territories, Labrador, and also Quebec. And in these instances, you're managing really people versus the bears, and you're managing the amount of bears that are harvested. So there's a population counts, estimates that are done, quotas that are estimated, tags that are handed out to communities, and then reporting comes back from the hunters as they get their kills, and they collect samples for the biologists, many kinds of samples: fat, hair, muscle, proof of sex, and all sorts of information, and that sort of collectively in the harvested type of management comes together as a package. There's other sorts of management though that Manitoba does, and it's monitoring for population health and habitat protection. So it really depends if you're talking about management, what sort of angle you're taking. Right. Yeah.
A lot of different things. Yeah. And so maybe we can kind of mention, so with a lot of wildlife, and both you and Stefan would know more about this too in some ways, but when we talk about managing other types of wildlife, especially terrestrial wildlife, when we talk about management and habitat protection, we can talk about things like putting fences up or borders around protected habitat, planting more grasses or trees, or kind of these kind of concrete habitat management principles that are used for a lot of terrestrial wildlife. With polar bears, of course, they're sea ice habitat, and sea ice isn't something we can put a border around, protect just whatever we want to protect. It really comes down to what the temperature in the air and the ocean are. and whether sea ice sticks around, and that's completely dependent. That's just physics. And so when we're looking at long-term polar bear protection and we're talking about conservation, even though we have 25,000 polar bears around the world, and there's a lot more animals, on the brink of extinction, and polar bears aren't at the moment. So why are we worried about their conservation? It's because we have this long-term issue. We can't stop sea ice from melting whenever we want it to. And so we need to be so proactive. All indications are that sea ice will continue to decline if nothing changes in the way humans are operating. And so that's why we're talking about it now, because we want to protect the future for polar bears and protect that sea ice, because it's not only polar bears that use that sea ice. Sea ice is to the ocean what soil is to a forest. It really kind of grows that base of the food chain. Things live in sea ice. It's not just your average lake ice. It is kind of its own microcosm, and the things that are growing in sea ice are feeding the other little organisms that are feeding the fish, that feed the seals, that feed the polar bears, all of which feed the people. And so this is a really important habitat we need to protect well ahead of time. It's not a classic habitat management issue, and that's why we talk about it so far ahead of time. And that comes down to the emissions we're releasing into the atmosphere. They act like a blanket around Earth, and they trap heat, which usually is a good thing. But what's happening is we've released these rampant amounts of emissions, and it's thickened this heat trapping blanket and just made it too warm. And so we know exactly what the problem is. We know the solutions, and we have them in hand. We've got renewable energies, solar, wind, less emissions. We know how to do it. And so that's why we're talking about doing that now, switching now, and keeping sea ice in the Arctic, keeping a great habitat and home for polar bears and all those other things that depend on the sea ice, including people and our way of life. So even if you live wherever you're watching in the world right now, you could live in Texas or Peru or Australia. Sea ice, the Arctic sea ice, is really neat. It's kind of like Earth's air conditioner. So it reflects heat away, sunlight away from Earth, and it prevents it from entering into the ocean. And it has this global cooling effect when we have healthy sea ice. And it's really good for all of us. It kind of keeps our way of life as we like it. So we all want to keep sea ice around. And luckily, if we do that, it's good for everyone, including polar bears. So that's why we talk about it. So there's a really good question about what the outlook for sea ice is this year. I'm not 100% sure at this moment what the outlook is. A really great website is the National Snow and Ice Data Center. They do an update every month, early in the month. So there should be one coming out next week-ish for early November. They've got daily ice images, and that's kind of my go-to spot to look. I was reading it last week. They've got wonderful graphs, a really informative and a whole Arctic look, Hudson Bay, but also all the other places, just kind of looking at sea ice. And they also do some Antarctic sea ice, same sort of thing. So it's really neat. Check it out. I put the links in the Explore comments sometimes, and happy to continue to share that. It's a pretty cool thing. We have Chris coming in, the Buggy One mechanic. Thanks, Chris, for helping us out today. He's going to sneak in the back here. BJ, you good? Hilarious. It's always exciting on the tundra. All right. So what else? Okay, cool question about polar bear hibernation. And maybe, Stefan, I'll pop this one over to you. So do polar bears hibernate or not? They're not the classic bear for that.
I don't know. Yeah.
Sorry, keep getting the cord caught.
So I think, and Vicky can correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay.
Generally, they're not. So there's lots of debate on how cold you need to be a hibernator, a true hibernator. Yeah. So if your core temperature is really dropping right down to, ambient temperature, so whatever the environment is, then you're really a true hibernator. And then if you're lowering your temperature, sometimes it's called torpor. So polar bears will kind of slow down, and I think females will lower temperatures a bit, but it's not anywhere near the true hibernators. So I think of them as super efficient energy conservation animals,
More of a mouthful.
but they're not necessarily they have t-shirts that say super but they're not a true hibernator in the full sense. So is that close, Vicky?
When they're in the den and they're sort of so they're not hibernating. But definitely you're correct. And they're waiting for their cubs to be born, and then and then life starts anew. But I guess they don't move around much once the cub is born. But they're definitely busy lactating, so body functions are continuing.
And when they have the cubs, they would be, aware of surroundings and things. I know there's a really great book that I think Joe Haven hunters and trappers put out, and had lots of great advice from hunters and elders about, be careful when you're walking over certain areas, because if you fall into a polar bear den, it will not end well for you usually. So they're definitely, awake enough to defend their nest if their den, if should the need arise. So yeah.
And it's only the females that are that efficient.
Right.
The males wander constantly.
Yeah. That's definitely only the females. And we used to think there was a theory for many years that at this time of year in Churchill, especially, that polar bears might go into what we called at the time walking hibernation. We figured, they're on land for all these months, they're not eating, they look pretty lazy. Maybe their body's kind of slowing down and they're in some sort of kind of weird hibernation mode. But actually, research showed that that's not what happens. Their bodies keep rolling at the same pace, basically. They're still processing the same number of calories. That's why they're losing weight every day, bit of weight every day over time, just like people would. But they're pretty.
And males and subadults will go into dens. They'll either, it might be a lazy den, like you hunker down under some willows and the willows got covered up in the blizzard that lasted 2 or 3 days, and then you crawl out. But they're in the high Arctic, especially during the winter. There's been bears that have gone into dens for like a month at a time, probably, that aren't pregnant or part of that cycle. So.
Kind of sounds like cold winters in Canada. Kind of hunker down in the you just cover yourself with blankets for a month.
Definitely, yeah. Some of the collared bears that we had in Fox Basin went into temporary dens, and I was like, oh, darn, the collars fell off again. And then a week later, or even a bit longer, they'd start moving again. Another time that bears they're not denning per se, but they're trying to hide from the heat. So they'll dig into snow. On Baffin Island, there are ice caps and glaciers, and they're very handy places to go in the summertime when it's hot, and the bears will dig a little kind of resting cave and enjoy the coolness. So not a den per se, but
polar bears definitely don't love the heat. And when scientists are studying them during these summer months, you have to be really careful what the temperatures are that day. And if you are darting a polar bear and they're running, you have to really can only try a little bit at a time, and then you got to back off so that bear doesn't overheat. So really careful about that. Their thick layer of body fat combined with any temperatures really much above freezing, they can overheat. So be really careful. They're very well insulated, which is good for those Arctic temperatures anyway. So Vicki, I've got another question back to you. So is it true, and I think this has to do with the management, I'm sure, that there are 5 times as many polar bears today as there were in the 1970s? And I think that has to do with maybe changing how they were harvested and how we kind of looked at populations. I know it's kind of a tough one.
I can't comment on the numbers exactly, because I actually don't know. But definitely there was a big change in management in the 70s when quotas were instituted across Canada, and also hunting was stopped around the world for polar bears with an international agreement between the range states, those 5 countries, Canada, USA, Greenland / Denmark, Norway, and Russia. And the populations of polar bears were really being depressed by overhunting all around the world, not just in Canada. And so along with that, so Canada didn't want to stop hunting completely because Indigenous people rely on hunting polar bears. So they went to a quota system, total allowable harvest, and started the work of estimating populations across the country. And that's continued since. And definitely, I'm sure, I think the polar bear populations have rebounded from that depression in the 60s and 70s, because they really did get over harvested but as to the exact number, I don't know. And I don't know that anyone really knows, because the estimates, we don't really have any for that time period. We can look at the fur records to see how many were taken, but we don't know what the rest, the numbers were of the original populations. Yeah, so a hard question.
It is, yeah.
But something that's very interesting, because it's a missing link, and maybe somebody out there can do some research and find out.
Yeah. Yeah, neat stuff. Well, thank you so much. Okay, what do we have next? Well, actually, Vicky, so one thing that Vicky works on quite a bit, well, maybe I shouldn't say quite a bit, but one thing that I look to you when I'm trying to learn more about this is human polar bear conflict, and how we can kind of prevent polar bears and people from, being negative influences on each other. So someone's wondering if there are still a lot of problems with polar bears going into villages. And maybe you can speak a bit to that kind of just big picture issue, and maybe a few ways that people are trying to work on that problem.
Yeah, just sort of quickly. Yes, so there are problems, and I live in Nunavut, so I'm most familiar with Nunavut territory, which this is an international audience, right? So that's in Canada, and that's north of where we are here in Manitoba. And when the polar bears are on shore, like they are here in Western Hudson Bay, the bears will get into the communities, attracted by the garbage dumps and just human activity generally, or maybe communities. Most communities are along the coast, so bears like to walk along the coast, and it's sort of easy for them to get into trouble when they go by communities or outpost camps. So that is an issue, and throughout Nunavut, and a little bit in the Northwest Territories, and also Quebec and Labrador. Wherever bears are, like here in Churchill, they'll get into things with humans. Yeah, so some of the simple things that people are working on is to reduce those attractants, and that's the main really item there, to enclose the dumps, to try to reduce the amount of waste and so on. A lot of people hunt in Nunavut, and they have caches, meat caches of different kinds of meat, and that can be a huge attractant to polar bears. And one of the ways that people are working at protecting these caches, because you need to have the cache still, is to put electric fences around the caches, and they're really effective against polar bears. People have been doing tests with them in a few communities in Nunavut, and putting up remote cameras and watching the bears come around, walking around and around, trying to figure out where to get in, and getting shocked and then going away. So that's a really great and relatively inexpensive way to keep bears out of trouble, and keep people happy, because they don't lose their precious meat caches.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you. That's really interesting. So we've got about another 5 to 10 minutes or so, and there's still so many great questions. If we don't get to all of them today, we are going to be doing this for the next few weeks. So we've got another chat tomorrow, and then Friday, and then we're going to sprinkle them in through the few weeks after that, and then some set on the schedule for, I think, the middle week of November. And then, like I said too, we're going to be doing more voiceovers and Facebook discussions, so we're going to be around answering questions all season. Happy to repeat answers anytime, and we just really look forward to talking to more of you. And I'm just so impressed with how many great questions we're getting today. This is our first one of the season. I was saying this morning to these guys, like, oh, we might start off a bit slow. I don't know how many people are watching today. We're just kind of kicking off, but this is wonderful. So thank you for everyone's questions. Someone's wondering if they maybe saw a wolf on the cam a couple days ago. You might have. And in fact, and I don't know if it would have been a wolf, but Vicky had great eyes and spotted like a caribou carcass this morning when we were driving, which was really neat. So maybe wolves would have, I don't know, might be there. We don't know.
Yeah, there was quite a bit of it left, so I don't think it, unless they got scared off. Wolves usually are pretty good at picking things, including bones, and crushing, and there's not usually much left. So, but yeah, it was a good spot, because it blends in very well with the tundra. So
very camouflage, right? We'll keep an eye out for wolves. They're definitely around. And please let us know if you see them. Really neat. Do a lot of bears come into Churchill? I wouldn't say a lot. There's definitely, a few every year that kind of come into town, and will get taken to the holding facility and then flown out of town. You can actually go, if you're on Twitter, the town of Churchill posts, Manitoba Sustainable Development in town does a tally every week of how many bears they've handled, have come into town, are in a holding facility, and that gets posted online, and that's something we can share around. And actually, I think it's Cloud that sometimes posts that in the comments too, so thanks for doing that. So take a look at that and give you a good idea kind of what's going on with bears near Churchill. As for in this general area, we're in the wildlife management area right now outside of Churchill, and so there can be anywhere from a couple to a couple dozen bears in this area at any given day, and so we'll just kind of keep our eyes out. We never really know what we're going to get out here. Every day's brand new, so it's pretty fun to see what the day's going to bring. This is kind of a neat question. I'm wondering, BJ, if you have a second, it's okay if you're busy, if you could pull up the population map again real quick. Someone's wondering, so they traveled extensively with a film crew in the Arctic in the 80s, except not in Churchill, and they never saw a polar bear the whole time. So where are they found in the Arctic? And so this is kind of interesting. I'm wondering where in the Arctic you traveled, just out of curiosity. One neat thing about polar bears is you see that kind of, the population, it looks like at the very top of the world there, the North Pole. Polar bears do not live at the North Pole. They actually form that ring around it over the continental shelf, and that's, again, because of seals. So polar bears can only live where they have food, and there's only food where waters are productive, and waters are not productive over the North Pole. It's too dark, it's too cold, there's not many fish or seals or anything there. So polar bears actually ring kind of the top of the countries there. They don't go right up to the top because all the good eating is down, south to them, but really it's still north there. So right at the top there, they're not. So if you were maybe at the North Pole doing some really cool trek, you might not run into a polar bear. So that's really interesting, actually. And plus, the Arctic's really not crawling with polar bears. They're really well spaced out. We've flown easily for 8-9 hours in a helicopter out on the Beaufort Sea and not seen a polar bear all day. It can be hard to find them. It's not like you're gonna definitely run into one up there. So that's really interesting. Thanks for that question. What is the average lifespan for a polar bear? And maybe I'll answer for wild and then get your input for the zoos and then Vicky's. But in the wild, it does depend, but males tend to they can live into their early 20s. That'd be a pretty old male, maybe a bit more depending, but males they fight for females and they can have kind of a rough life. You see them get all these old scars by the time they're in their early 20s. That would be a pretty good life for a male, often their late teens. Females can live into their mid to late 20s and have cubs into their mid 20s. I think I saw maybe one female once with a cub that was a bit older, still in her late 20s. Any older than that would be quite old. Does that sound about right? Kind of 20s?
Certainly.
Yeah.
But I think they can live quite long in zoo situations.
Yeah. So in the zoos, they do live a bit longer. They have a bit less stressful lifestyle. Can you speak a bit to that?
Yeah, there's definitely some long distance records or long age records of a few bears. At Assiniboine Park Zoo, we had a bear that lived to be 41 and 11 months. So for a while, the oldest bear, but then there's one bear, I think there were one or two bears that lived to be about 42. So that seems to be the maximum lifespan for a bear under perfect conditions, I guess, in order to live that long. But generally, bears in zoological facilities are just pretty close to what you would see in the wild. You don't have the males dying sooner because they're not allowed to do all the dangerous things that they get to do in the wild. But but then you get, I think with all animals, you'll get the tail end of the really long livers, and zoos kind of foster that end of the scale.
Yeah, it's neat to see.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. Well, maybe we only have time for about one more question. I see there's a few more we're not going to be able to get to, but we definitely want to take those tomorrow if we can. So thank you so much. So just kind of a neat question. Do polar bear moms have a tendency to emancipate or abandon their cubs early like brown bears sometimes do? Does anyone? That's a really great question. You have.
I think depending on the productivity of the habitat that they're in, bears will wean their cubs earlier or later. So if it's a really productive habitat, maybe 2.5 years. If it's really poor habitat, maybe 3.5 years. So there's some flexibility, and mums somehow are being able to gauge how fit and how able the cubs are to make it, and investing in those cubs accordingly, which is pretty amazing. I don't think anyone knows how or what are the cues to make those decisions for a female. But yeah.
Neat stuff. Anyone have anything to add? Okay, great. Well, we are going to have to wrap up here pretty quick. Yeah, thank you guys so much for being good sports today, and for BJ for being patient. I know, with this buggy one stuff. We will keep Explore informed, the community informed about what we're doing. Thank you to all the cam ops that are on the cams all day, these polar bear cams. You guys rock. It's really great working with you and communicating with you, and you're always patient with what we're doing on Buggy One. So we'll let you know what's going on. Thank you so much to our panelists today, Stefan Peterson, Vicky Sination, and thanks to Bradley Hampson, and thanks to the Frontier School Division this week. It's been really great working with you guys. Our webcast tomorrow will make it happen, whether it's here or at the Churchill Northern Study Center, but it'd be cool to tune in if you're available, learn a bit more about what these great Manitoba schools are doing. Like, it's completely amazing, all these neat rural schools being connected by technology and kind of tapping into that. And it's been neat. We've been coming and doing Tundra Connections and live chats from Churchill for years now, and we've just really slowly been growing the audience that actually lives here, and it's really nice to all of a sudden get more of that and work with more of the teachers and the students. They've just been passionate and brilliant, so thank you so much for that. And thank you to all our sponsors and partners, as always. Thanks to Parks Canada. That Cape Churchill Cam is amazing. Check it out. I don't know if the hairs are still there. I'll have to look at it after this segment. Thanks to Frontiers North Adventures for Buggy One, for everything. For tomorrow with the day buggy, this just really a special thing. They're wonderful to work with. And thank you to explore.org. As always, just so fun to work with. We love doing this every year. Thanks to Courtney and Rick today for passing the questions on. Thanks to Jonathan for helping us switch over all the feeds all the time. You guys are the best, and we're going to see a lot of each other, I hope, in the next few weeks. We'll be around. If we're not on camera, we're still in the comments when we can be, and just ask us what you want to know. We're going to be doing behind-the-scenes stuff. We'll get Haley out here. We'll do what we can to let you guys know what it's like up here. It's really great. So thank you so much for joining us again, and we will talk to you tomorrow, I hope.